what are the real questions that we need to have addressed within the SEC? What are some of the key questions that are going to determine who ends up hoisting that trophy in Atlanta when it's all said and done? And we got to start with the top dog now. They're on the mic right now. We're going to talk about them later in the live show. But when you look at Georgia, man, the formula you would imagine will stay the same, but there's a couple of key pieces, a couple key ingredients that are going to change within that team. New OC and Mike Bobo. New quarterback likely going to be Carson Beck. Darrell K. Royal once said, you dance with the one that brung you. And the one that brung Georgia a season ago was the run game. Now, they were extremely balanced, but they ran for over 200 yards a game. They ran the ball 53% of the time. They got a lot of the key pieces on the offensive line back. I want to make this clear. I believe they will stick with that formula. I think Mike Bobo was promoted internally to keep with the system that worked. I want to make that very clear. But to the exact same extent, temptation, man, it's a funny thing. It's a funny thing. And I'm just saying, if you're Mike Bobo and you're out there and you're running 11 on 11, you see Carson Beck slinging the rock around. You see him maybe throw one or two frozen ropes down the right sideline. You say, hey, man, that's some horsepower. That's some juice at the quarterback position, just physically at least, that maybe we haven't had here all that often. Now, Stetson Bennett's the GOAT. Stetson Bennett has got GOAT status in Athens. Don't take my word for it. Kirby Smart said that after the national title game, but I want to make this very clear. Carson Beck has got some juice when it comes to throwing the football. And so I wonder if the temptation of what Carson Beck brings to the table doesn't cause you to just maybe take a peek at going a little bit less 12 personnel. Maybe you spread it out a little bit more. And I think that's a slippery slope for Georgia because they have made their mark being the bully, dictating the line of scrimmage, dictating their terms to the opposition. We saw it multiple times last year. So do they tinker with the formula? If they don't, I think they can still be the bully. I think they can do exactly what they did a season ago, run the table, do their thing. But if they want to get a little more finesse, I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but I am saying you dance with the one that brung you, and the one that brung Georgia previously was that physical style of play. So that's my big question. Everyone tuned in live, we appreciate you, man. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you're subscribed. No more time to be wasting now. Probably almost less than 40 days now to college football season. We're flirting with it now. We're flirting with it. Once you locked in, appreciate you in advance for that. Now, the LSU Tigers took the mic yesterday. We sat right here with Jaden Daniels, had a conversation with him. Brian Kelly was walking around here. What are they this coming season? And my question more specifically for LSU is, do we see a consistent product from the Tigers in 2023? Because potential is fun to talk about, and there's tons of potential on this roster at LSU, but you can only talk about potential for so long. And the reality is for LSU, they're not a fan base that just wins 9 games and high five and walk off and have a good time. That's not what they're signing up for at LSU. That's not what they expect in Baton Rouge. And when I look at LSU, they're a lot like, the talking phase of the whole dating scene, if you will. Like, it's fun to talk. It's fun to talk about winning 10 games. It's fun to talk to, that attractive whoever you're talking to. But the reality is at some point in time, you got to determine what you're going to be. And for LSU right now, they have the pieces to determine what they're going to be. You got Jaden Daniels back. You got Harold Perkins, who I believe is the best defensive player in college football. You got Mason Smith, who they were really excited about last year as a true freshman. Josh Williams, you went and got Logan Nix from the portal. Like, all these pieces at LSU are currently in place to do some really exciting things. And if they can be consistent, they have a very, very real chance to win the West for the second year in a row. And when I say I want to see them be consistent, I'm not asking them to go out and win the SEC and beat Georgia. I'm not even asking them to beat Bama for the second time in a row. If you do, phenomenal. I think a lot of people in Baton Rouge at this point may even expect that, but I'm not asking you to do that. What I'm asking you to do is to beat who you're supposed to beat and beat them how you're supposed to beat them. Like LSU last year, they had no business messing around with Auburn for 4 quarters, going down to them in the first half. LSU was way more talented than that. LSU had no business losing to Texas A&M. I think A&M is going to be good now here in the coming years, but I don't think they were supposed to beat LSU a season ago based on what LSU had last year. Can they be consistent? LSU had no business scratching and clawing to find their way out of Fayetteville, Arkansas. Like, that wasn't what this roster has available to them. And so for LSU, if they can be consistent, that's going to change the entire complexion of the SEC. So I'll leave it at that. Now, Tennessee is another team we got to talk about, and we're in Nashville, Tennessee. We got Josh Heupel and company coming through media days here very, very soon. But even so, for Tennessee, my big question is, does it all come together? And to put it most simply, there's 2 ingredients I'm looking at. The first is Joe Milton. right? There's so much made about his arm strength and his physical tools and what he could potentially be in the NFL. Like, all that is fair to talk about, and I'm on the Joe Milton train. I'm buying stock in Joe Milton like it's going out of style. But even so, for Joe Milton, the question remains, can he just be accurate? Can he be dialed in? There's a lot more we could say about that, but I want to leave that in one box right here. The other box we got to talk about is the secondary improved. Can they ratchet it up a little bit? I don't need the secondary to be incredible. I don't need them to be elite. Can they be better than allowing 270-plus yards a game passing? So those are pretty obvious things we've talked about on this show for a period of time here. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, until Tennessee gets to play in ball games. We get some sort of sample size. But the reality for Tennessee, the exciting thing for Tennessee, is Big Mo is in the building at Tennessee. The momentum at Tennessee is very, very real. The iron is hot. And so this year, obviously, is an incredible opportunity for Tennessee and what they could accomplish on the field. But zoom out a little bit. What is the difference between Tennessee and a school like a Georgia, or historically a school like an Alabama? It's the stacking of classes on the recruiting trail, right? I mean, Tennessee hasn't recruited in the top 3 like Georgia and Alabama have. And that was the big difference when Tennessee went to Athens last year. It was like, hey, man, the depth and the Jimmies and the Joes that Georgia has, like, it is what it is, man. What do you want to say? And so for Tennessee, if they're able to recreate some of that magic they had a season ago, you beat Alabama again, or you win double-digit games, you go win a New Year's Six Bowl, anything in that category, then you make it very real to recruits. Hey, this is what we are under Josh Heupel. Last year wasn't just a good story. This is who we are as a team now going forward. You can expect this from the Power T for years to come. And when you can sell on the recruiting trail stability and a real identity and not just one good season, which I think Josh Heupel and Tennessee will be able to sell in the future, to be clear, that changes the entire complexion of how you can operate on the recruiting trail. And when you stack those classes, now we talk about sustained success, and we talk about Tennessee competing with Alabama and Georgia consistently when it comes to the football field. So for Tennessee, does it all come together? It's important for 2023, but the ripple effect of that, I think, is what we really got to look at when it comes to the Southeastern Conference and when it comes to Tennessee for the foreseeable future. Now, Auburn, talking about talent, they went to work in the transfer portal. Over 20 individuals headed to Auburn, Alabama to go help Hugh Freeze turn that thing around. And there's a lot of warranted hope in Auburn, Alabama, but the reality is the hope is built on a lot of players that just transferred to Auburn, Alabama. Catch my drift? And one of those players, probably the most important player in that transfer portal class, is Peyton Thorne, quarterback transferred from Michigan State, played a lot of football, was a 2-year captain at Michigan State. Like, dude can play some football now. Even more importantly, dude's a leader, which I think you need in that locker room under a new staff. But he missed all of spring practice. I cannot express adequately enough how difficult it is to learn an entire offensive system in the stretch between after spring ball until fall camp, which is as long as he will have to work with, just so we're all on the same page here. So for Auburn, all the talent and all that they have on that roster, I just wonder what the impact's going to be. Because to be real, Auburn could mess around and win 9 games. Like, they have that now on the roster. This is not last year's Auburn team. They revamped the entire system. A lot of those cats they got transferring in, they're going to ask to start day one. Simple as that. So if Auburn does end up putting it together, look at the ripple effect for them in 2023. Look at what they could do. Look at who they play. They play Georgia, Ole Miss, Bama, all at Jordan-Hare. Those are massive games. That's a massive impact they could make on not just the SEC conference race. Look at the college football playoff race. Also, they go to LSU. Depending on how they put it together, how those transfers mesh with that staff, and how quickly Peyton Thorne gets up to speed, Auburn's going to be a team that is very much so in the wild card category when it comes to the Southeastern Conference. Now, last thing we want to talk about here is Alabama. In Alabama, there's a lot of talk about the quarterback position with them, and I think it's fair, right? Quarterback, most important position on the field, absolutely a conversation we need to have. What if I told you the quarterback position at Alabama in 23 is a little bit overrated? It's a little bit overrated, and I don't say that in a negative way towards what Alabama's going to be. Look at what Tommy Rees did last year at Notre Dame. 60% of the time, they ran the football. Ran for over 200 yards a game, I believe, or right in the neighborhood of 200 yards a game. Alabama last year, they ran the football 49% of the time. So just based on who you have now as your offensive coordinator, you're telling me you're going to make it more of a priority to run the football. So the question for Alabama for me is, does that offensive line get to play in bully ball? they get back to just being that big kid on the playground. Because to be real with you, the way they've recruited, Alabama has the ability to do that. And I think that's going to be their approach. And we'll talk to Greg McElroy here in just a few short minutes, but that is kind of the approach for Alabama. And here's the deal for Bama. When you're the big, strong kid, you get to dictate to everybody else the way you're going to play the game. Like, think back to when you were on the playground. You're that big, strong bully. You're playing foursquare. You decide the rules of foursquare. Well, this is how we usually play. No. I'm about 6'1". I'm 230 pounds. I have a mustache. I'm in the 7th grade. I decide how we play this game now. Doesn't matter who has the most nuanced scheme and who's going to spread you out the most and go up tempo and who's able to have, these different sets that are going to confuse you. Like, no. When you are the bully and you push people against their will, that is how the game is won. And that is what Alabama is going to try and do in 2023, but it all falls on the shoulders of the offensive line. Period, mic drop, the end. That is going to be the approach for Alabama. They're going to live in the A gap and the B gap. They'll try and control the edges, and that's going to be how they get down, man. That's Alabama in 23. They're going back to bully ball. But again, the quarterback, when I say it's overrated, you still got to do your job. You can't give the ball to the other team. You got to hit open shots when we got them. You got to make sure you hit that deep post when he's wide open and that safety bites. But even so, for Alabama in 23, it's going to be on the offensive line to move the ball and set up a 3rd and 3, 2nd and 4, situations like that for the quarterback then to operate out of. Because if Alabama can't do that, then a lot of people that were talking down on Bama and Saban's lost a step, they're going to be quick to say, hey, I was right. Hey, I knew it the whole time. Hey, I told y'all. So that would be the reality. And if that is the reality, if Alabama can't get what they want in the trenches and they can't play bully ball, well, then you're in the situation where you've already jumped out of the airplane when you're skydiving. You got to repack the parachute while you're falling back to earth. So for Bama, that's going to be the reality. It's going to be the case that they try and make when it comes to 2023. But, man, I cannot wait to see a lot of questions that need answering for this 2023 season. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.